Lumber prices have been falling recently, and I've had tons of comments in my videos from people who say that they're already feeling the effects. Prices will continue falling as lumber retailers clear out their older, more expensive inventory and start buying cheaper lumber. There is one category, however, that does not seem to be falling at all, and that is plywood. In this video, we're going to talk about what's going on in the plywood markets and when we might see similar declines there. As we all know, lumber prices have been down significantly recently. And when I talk about lumber prices coming down and quote actual numbers, what I'm really talking about are the lumber's futures market. In general, it's a very good stand-in for all lumber products, but it isn't perfect. The lumber futures most quoted represents the cost of 1,000 board feet of random length dimensional lumber, basically 2x4s. Houses are not just built out of 2x4s though. So let's get a bit more specific and talk about the other lumber that people care about when we talk about how much things cost, and that is plywood and OSB, or more generally what I will call structural panels. The first thing that we have to understand is that there are hundreds of different types of plywood, OSB, or other sheet goods out there that are used for a lot of different things. Everything from shelving to cabinets to furniture to the floors and walls of homes. Each different product type can have a different supply chain using different types of wood, different glues and adhesives, different coatings, and different techniques for manufacturing. Just like with all lumber products, plywood prices have been out of control. In fact, here is a graph from the Federal Reserve tracking the price of structural panels for the past 5 years. What is interesting with this graph is how consistent the prices have been. If I overlap a graph of random length lumber prices over the same period, you'll notice that one of these things is not like the other. The structural panel market has gone high and stayed high, while the market for 2x4s has fluctuated wildly and is currently on a downswing. So why is that? Why have those prices gone high and stayed high? Well, there are a few different reasons. First is that there is not unlimited capacity. In some mills, you can add another shift, you can make a few tweaks to your equipment, and that could increase the amount of lumber that you're able to put through the mill. For mills that produce structural panels, however, it's not that simple, and it may not even be possible. There are just more steps in the process. More equipment and more space is needed. For example, the glues and adhesives need time to cure and dry correctly, and there's really no way to rush that. In short, it's just much harder and more expensive and takes longer to produce structural panels than it does dimensional lumber. So in times where there is a shortage, they can't just up production like you can with other types of wood. And that's one of the reasons why those prices have gone high and stayed high. Added to that, there are just fewer producers of structural panels than there are for lumber. The top 10 softwood lumber producers in the US make up around 50% of the total market. But the top 10 producers of plywood make up 60% of the total market, and the top 10 producers of OSB make up 100% of the market. There are just fewer producers, and that means that there's less capacity and that they're more susceptible to supply chain issues. And the fewer producers you get, the less competition there is and the less pressure there is to keep prices low. And that is why prices for structural panels have not changed much in the past couple of years, even if the cost of 2x4s have come down during that time. So what's going to happen next? Well, these producers are not immune to the macroeconomic situation in the country and in the world at large. The same high level and long-term factors that apply to regular lumber production apply to these manufacturers as well. That means that higher interest rates will reduce the demand for housing because those higher interest rates increase the cost of housing to everyone. Changing consumer habits have also reduced the demand for lumber in general. People are not building decks, they're not buying as much furniture, they're spending their money on going out and traveling. And increased inflation and fears of a recession are also reducing the demand for lumber. The cost of structural panels will come down in general, and plywood, OSB, and other related products will become cheaper. As with regular lumber, however, that will take some time. Retailers need to work through their higher priced inventory before they get in all the cheap stuff, but in general, there will be a point where they will have no choice but to lower those prices. A couple last thoughts on structural panels though. The first is that this analysis doesn't apply to every single type. Some types of plywood, like Baltic birch for example, are high for other entirely unrelated reasons, and that's not going to change anytime soon. Secondly, costs at the mills have gone up. Labor, transportation, chemicals, adhesives, and all the other stuff, it all costs more. And so while those prices will decline, there is a floor and they won't go down to what they once were. Also, it's not uncommon for lumber companies to shut down panel mills if prices get to the point where it costs more to produce than it's worth to sell. That will keep supply in check and keep prices more stable in the long run. So we're not going to see any huge discounts. It's not going to go back to what it once was, but we are going to definitely see much lower prices for panels than we've seen in the past. So tell me, what are plywood and OSB panels doing where you live? Have you already seen the prices come down? Leave me a comment and let me know what you're seeing. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.